My name is Nicolas Lira. I'm an archaeologist from Chile. I did my PhD in the University of La Sorbonne in Paris, in France. I'm here in Brooklyn College as part of the Fulbright Scholar in Residence program. I'm attached to the Anthropology and Archaeology department, the Sociology department, and the Modern Language department. Okay, so I'm very happy to be here at Brooklyn College during this fall semester. I'm very happy of this opportunity and to present you my work, which is called Traditional Indigenous Watercrafts in Northern Patagonia and Southern Chile, Typology, Technology, and Navigation Routes from the Andes Mountains to the Sea. This work is part of my PhD dissertation, so you will see some little things in French. Most of it is in English for this presentation, but there are some images or some information in French, so I will try to explain it well, okay? For starting the presentation, I will talk during this conference about the central problematic of my research, which is the role of the indigenous traditional navigation in this region, okay? During this presentation, we will see the different types of watercrafts that people of this region used in prehistoric and historic times. These watercrafts are mainly rafts, dugouts, and sawn plank canoes. We will talk also about the contact routes and the mobility and the exchanges that these people were possible to do using these watercrafts. We'll talk also about the antiquity of the navigation and the use of watercrafts in this region. And finally, we will address into the problematic of the maritime peopling of the southern Patagonia region, which has been a major archaeological problem since the beginning of the archaeological practice in this territory. So, the region of Patagonia normally is known by most of people of being located in Argentina. But in fact, it's a region that is shared by Chile and Argentina. It's a huge territory which goes from the center south of Argentina in the, with the Colorado River as a northern limit up to the Strait of Magellan in the southern end of the South American continent, okay? Our study area is part of this huge territory, the northern Patagonia and southern Chile region, which has as limits the Biobío River as its northern limit here, the Chiloé Island as its southern limit, the Andean lakes, they are mountain lakes in its eastern part with the Andes Cordillera in all this area, and the Pacific Ocean at the west with very few little coastal islands like Santa Maria Island and Mocha Island. This territory is very big, but has two characteristics that I want to remark and to present to you. The first one is a system of linked water bodies, which means that there are different types of water bodies like lakes, lagoons, ponds, swamps that are connected between them by different rivers that drain from the Andes Mountains through the Central Valley, the Central Plains, up to the Pacific Ocean, okay? As you can see in this topographic cut, the topography of the region is of a very steep territory on the eastern part with the Andes Mountains, which gives as a result that the rivers in this area are not possible to navigate during all its course. Okay, so the navigation in these rivers will be a discontinuous navigation. The other characteristic that I want to remark and show you is the diversity of forest and forest resources that we can find in this region. You can see in this map, this is the actual forest distribution. Different researchers have tested that this distribution would be more or less the same since the 6th millennium before the present. Okay. Obviously, this actual distribution has been managed by the human beings, and all through history it has been a management and an intervention of man into this forest. Okay. In pre-Columbian or pre-Hispanic times, this region should have been covered completely by forest, with some little areas of horticulture. So in this region of river, lakes, and forest, developed a culture of wood. Okay, people or populations that inhabited the forest and that had a highly specialized life way to the forest, connected to the forest and their resources. Okay, these people developed a wood technology, which means that it's a very developed knowledge. They had a very developed knowledge of the characteristics and properties of wood, and were capable to produce wood objects like the ones that we can see here, wooden masks, wooden ceremonial poles, and funerary poles, and many others, but also different kind of tools to work with the wood. Okay? This can be seen since the beginning of the settlement of this region, from the first inhabitants, as we can see in the example of the very renowned archaeological site of Monteverde, which is located in the southern part of this territory, which has more than 12,000 years of antiquity. When the European settlers, the Spanish conquistadors, arrived to this region, they found a series of different ethnic groups. We can see here in this map the distribution of these ethnic groups at the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors, which are mainly in the center part of this territory, the Mapuches and Huilliches, which are horticulturalists, the Picunches, Pehuenches, and Puelches, which are hunter-gatherers of the mountains, and in the southern part, the maritime hunter-gatherers called Chonos, which mixed with the Huilliches that arrived to the Chiloé island. However, all this population shared a common cultural background. Okay? So this is very important to have in mind for the prehistoric and pre-Hispanic times. So different scholars, as Bengoa and other historians, have proposed that this pre-Hispanic or pre-Columbian society, native indigenous society, was a riverine society, okay, which exchanged, communicated, and settled in the shores of the rivers and the lakes of the region. This is important because the traditional historiography had underestimated the maritime component of the local cultures. Okay? They have described these populations as land-based, very attached to the land, and as horticulturalists and breeders. Okay? But this current research shows a greater importance and dependency on the river resources. Well, I have already presented you a little bit about the background of this region and the background of my research. Now I will present you a little bit of the data that I used for my research, which was a multidisciplinary research using three sources of data: the archaeological data, the ethnohistoric data, and the ethnographic data. This was mainly because the archaeological data was very scarce, was very little for the topic that I am addressing. Okay? So I took the ethnohistoric and the ethnographic data to fill in the gaps that this archaeological, that this lack of archaeological data that I faced. Okay, so this lack of archaeological data can be explained mainly by 2 points. The first of them is the lack of archaeological research in this specific topic in this region, okay? In the topic of navigation, watercrafts, and the maritime technologies. The second explanation could be also in relationship with this first one, could be the expensive costs of this type of research that is mostly that has mostly an underwater component on it. Okay, so it's necessary to have archaeologists specialized in underwater archaeologists and scuba diving. Talking about the archaeological data, the first evidences for navigation are archaeological settlements and sites that were found in different islands in the region. Okay? This is indirect evidence of navigation. There are all islands that can be reached only by the use of watercrafts, and that the permanent settlement on these islands could be sustained only using watercrafts or boats. Okay? So we have as the most ancient settlement in an island in this region, the Chiloé Island settlements, with an antiquity of almost 6,000 years, and which is located at almost 2 to 5 kilometers from the continent shore. Other important pre-Hispanic settlement is the Mota Island, with an antiquity of more than 3,000 years, and which is located at 34 kilometers from the shore. This is the farthest island from the shore that the people of this region reached. The Santa Maria Island in the northern part of the region, with a dating of almost 2,000 years, and which is located at nearly 15 kilometers from the coast, and the Victoria Island at the Nahuelhuapi Lake, the Nahuelhuapi Andean Lake, which has an antiquity of almost 2,000 years. This island is very important because it's the only settlement that has been found in a lake island in all the region. This doesn't mean that there are not other lake islands with settlements, but there hasn't been systematic archaeological research in these other islands. This is the only island where archaeological research has been done and where we find archaeological sites of this antiquity. So have in mind that this is indirect evidence. We haven't found the boats or watercraft that these people of these periods used to reach these islands, okay? As ethnohistoric data, I use the different texts, drawings, and maps that the different explorers, voyageurs, and also the first settlers, the Spanish conquistadors, the Spanish priests that first arrived to the region, but also of voyageurs of the 19th and 20th century, okay? We can see here some of these texts of the Spanish conquest, but also I used photographs of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, which shows these different boats and watercrafts and the people using them. Also, as ethnohistoric data, the travel maps of the first voyagers that went into the region and that used the native guides that knew the different roads for reaching the different areas of the region. Okay, one of them is the voyage of Juan Fernandez to the Nahuelhuapi Lake in the 17th century, which went from Chiloé up to the Nahuelhuapi Lake. And going through the ethnographic data, I used also the general ethnographic studies of different scholars that worked in the region, mostly in the 19th and 20th century. We can see here some of the works of Ines Hilger, an American nun and anthropologist that conducted ethnographic work in the Calafquén Lake region, Calafquén and Panguipulli Lake region. And here is a photograph that she took of two people, a couple of Mapuche people, using a dugout canoe in a river next to the Calafquén Lake. But also as ethnographic data, I was able to conduct current ethnographic research focused on the maritime and navigation topic, okay? This was possible because the indigenous people, the native people, still lives in this area, and they still have memory of the use of this kind of watercrafts and boats. It's important to say that this kind of boats, they are not in use at the present days, okay? They were in use just until the first half of the 20th century in some special places during the 60s and 70s of the 20th century, but they are not used anymore, okay? So I conducted ethnographic interviews in the Panguipulli, Calafquén area and in the Ranco Lake area. We can see here in these pictures a Mapuche man that built a dugout canoe during the 2000s, inspired by his own father and using a chainsaw, okay? He didn't use the traditional construction tools or way, but he used the memory of his own father to build this dugout canoe because he wanted to navigate around the swamp that was next to his house. All this data allowed it to characterize the different types of navigation that was used or conducted in this territory. First of all, we have a maritime navigation which was a coastal navigation, always within the view of the mainland coastline, okay? We can see in the picture in the right, this is Mota Island, which is the farthest island from the continent, 34 kilometers. And in a sunny day, we can perfectly see the island from the coast and the coast from the island. So the maritime navigation that these people practiced was a coastal navigation all along the shore, okay? A lake navigation also, which is characterized or is telling about the lakes as inland seas which connect the sea and the land in the inland, and a river navigation which is from the beginning an interrupted navigation due to this steep topography which I already mentioned. It was also possible to recognize the different types of boats that were used in this region. The first of these boats, or watercrafts, it's not a raft, it's not a boat really. So we have the rafts that are structures of united material that has the property of float by itself, okay? We don't have many evidence for this type of watercrafts. They are mentioned in the different documents, but we don't have any photographs, we don't have any drawings, and neither archaeological remains of this kind of watercrafts. Okay? We only have this engraver where we can see in this corner what can be defined as a raft that was built to travel to the Mota Island, which is here, okay? But we can imagine, or we can think that this kind of rafts, which were, in the case of the Mota Island rafts, beach or vegetal fibers rafts, like the ones that are today in use in Lake Titicaca in Peru and Bolivia. Okay. The rafts of this region could be built with vegetal fibers, but also with logs and pieces of wood or bark. Also. Okay. The second type of boat were the dugout canoes, which are mainly a shell built by the hollowing of a trunk. It's one of the simplest type of boat. It's very difficult or expensive in energy and in work to build a dugout canoe, but it's very simple in its conception. Okay? And we can see that they were of different size, like this one built for a family, or this other one that was built for transporting 9 or 10 people, or also a great quantity of cargo. And finally, the third kind of watercraft that we find in this region are the sawn plank boats, which are called dalka. They are basically built in 3 or 5 wooden planks that were sewn together with vegetal fibers and caulked with a special mixture. Okay? It's not easy to understand or to think about this kind of boats nowadays. We are not used to this kind of boats, but this type of technology can be found in different parts of the world, and it's basically big planks, one big plank in the center as the floor of the boat, of the canoe, and 1 or 2 planks on each side, on each of their sides, to build the shell. okay? They were perforated all around the perimeter of the plank and sewn with vegetal fibers, as we can sew clothes one with each other, okay? And after this, they were caulked with a mixture of different kind of leaves, bark, mud, and oils and other things to make waterproof this shell. We can see here in these photographs a plank canoe, a swim plank canoe, a dalka, used by the native people of the region. You can see here the suns. Here we have the only example, the old example that we have nowadays of these boats, which is stored in the Etnografiska Museum in Stockholm. It was taken by a botanist, a Swedish botanist, to Sweden and stored in the Stockholm Museum, and now is the only complete example of this kind of boats. And here we can see a piece of one of these planks that was found in Lake Tapo in the southern part of our study area. And you can see here some of the holes used for sew the planks together. Using the different kinds of data, it was also possible to characterize the different means of propulsion that were used with these boats that we have just seen. Between these means of propulsion, we can find the oar, the paddle, and the ruddering oar, okay? The ruddering oar is mainly a big oar that is used from the stern of the boat and has the special characteristic that the person that is using it can propel the boat at the same time that he's ruddering, with a special technique and a special movement using this ruddering oar, okay? We can see here in this picture how this kind of propulsion is used from the back of the boat, ruddering and propelling the boat. And the paddles that are much more simple to use from the side of the boats. There were used also the pole, mainly in the shallow waters of some lagoons, ponds, and swamps. And other secondary means of propulsion were the current or stream, obviously in the rivers where you can use the current of the river, but also in the sea, where some streams are highly powerful and can help or constrain the navigation in some of these areas. Also, the hauling, using animals like the horse in historic times, because it's important to have in mind that before the arrival of the European settlers in this area, the people here didn't have animals, cargo animals, suitable for this kind of things. But also, it could have been done by people hauling the boat for very short parts of the roads. Okay. And finally, the sail, which is a major problem in all the American archaeological debate because it's not really, it's continuously debated if the sail was used before the arrivals of the first Europeans to America or not. Okay? We have evidence of the use of quadrangular sails in this region, but the discussion continues. And now to go back to the archaeological data, we have direct evidence of these kinds of boats only for the recent periods, okay? For historical periods from the arrival of the European settlers. There has been foundings of different canoes, dugout canoes and plank boats mainly by amateurs, people that find these boats in the rivers and lakes and take them out of context, losing part of their archaeological information. Most of these boats are stored in the different museums of the region where I was able to study them in different ways, but also some of them were part of underwater archaeological research conducted by a team of archaeologists, maritime archaeologists, underwater archaeologists, which I am part of. Okay, so here we can see in this photo how a couple of underwater archaeologists are recording in situ a dugout canoe in a river of the region. From these archaeological remains, it was possible to take samples and to make C14 datings for these boats. Okay? The problem of these datings is that they are historical, and as you may know, for the people that are taking the archaeology courses, the C14 datings for historical period give a very large time span, okay, of nearly 300 years. So we have most of these boats that are grouped in this period between the 17th and the 20th century, okay? When we are talking about thousands of years when we are talking in archaeological research of thousands of years ago, 200 years of difference is not a big problem. It can be easily resolved. But when we are talking of historic periods, it's not the same thing, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, or the 20th century, okay? And we have also some few examples of datings, a little more antique, but they're all from the 15th century on, okay? It was also possible to take samples of these boats for the identification of the wood that was used for the building of them, okay? So we can see that different things can be done with pieces or examples that are already in museums without an archaeological context, okay? We have that most of the dugouts, canoes, and the plank boats were built in laurel. In laurel is a kind of evergreen tree, which is a big tree with a big trunk, and also it was very used the coihue, okay, which is similar. It's, obviously, it's not the same, but we can say that it's similar to the beech tree, okay? And we have here the drawings of these trees, the laurel and the coihue. Also, using these archaeological boats, it was possible to measure them and to estimate the dimensions and the loading capacity of these boats. Here we can see the blue dots are representing the archaeological dugouts, the dimensions of the archaeological dugouts, which are grouped mainly between the 3 meters and the 7 meters of long, okay? The violet quadrangular dots are representing the ethnohistoric data for the dimensions of the dugouts, okay? And we can see that there are mentions of dugouts of more of a bigger dimension, okay? One of them of almost 14 meters of long. But if we add to this graphic the data of the Dalca, the ethnohistoric data of the Dalca, because as I already told you, we don't have complete remains of this kind of boats, only the ethnographic example of the Stockholm Museum. The yellow triangles here are representing the ethnohistoric data of the Dalcas, of the Sun plank boats, and we can see that they are mainly a little bit more bigger than the dugouts, with a bigger loading capacity also, okay? And finally, with the sum of all this information, the archaeological data, the ethnohistoric and the ethnographic data, it was possible to reconstruct the building process or the process of use and manufacture of these boats, what is called la chaîne opératoire in French archaeology, okay? And we have that the first stage of this process is the acquisition of the wood, of the trunk of the tree. It has to be selected and cut by the people. There are different criteria for select the tree trunk. It has to be a healthy tree, a very ripe tree without many branches that can cause later breakage of the boat. And finally, it has to be transported to the place of working, okay? The main work during the manufacture process, the manufacture of the boat, which consists, in the case of a dugout, mainly of the hollowing of the dugout, using different tools that can be stone tools, iron tools already in historic period, because they didn't have iron tools before the arrival of Europeans, but also the use of fire to help in this process of hollowing. They use fire in different stages in a controlled technique, firing the surface of the trunk and then retiring or hollowing the wooden material or mass with tools. This was followed by different levels or stages of firing of the boat. Then it comes the usage stage of the boat, which was mainly used in the transport of people or goods, but also in the exploitation of the maritime resources, mainly in the coast, for fishing or collecting seafood. And one very important part of the usage of these boats is the maintenance, okay? They had to maintain the boat in a proper way so it can have or reach a bigger lifespan. Okay, it was a lot of work to do these boats, so they gave a lot of care in the maintenance of these boats. And finally, when the boats reach the end of their life, of their use life, there were three main ways of finishing their life. The abandon of these boats for different reasons, the recycling also, recycling the wood or the form also of the boat, mainly as water containers for people or for animals, because as I already told you, it was a lot of work to do these objects, these boats. And this can be seen as one of the reasons of why we haven't found many boats of this kind, okay? And finally, the wreck of these boats, which is the most violent ending for these boats, but is the one that is the best for archaeologists because we can find them complete and in the stage of their usage. And some of these stages were found in the archaeological examples. For example, the firing process. This is the inside of one of the dugouts that I was able to study. We can see the firing traces or wears. And here I'm showing you an example of an engraver of debris, a Dutch engraver, showing the native people of Virginia building or manufacturing a dugout using this firing technique. It was also possible to find tool wears or tool traces over the surface of some of these archaeological boats. Okay, here I'm showing you some of these iron tools wears. It's possible to say that they are iron tool wears because they are very clean on their cuts. Okay, here and here. It was not possible to clearly recognize stone tool wears over these archaeological boats, but we can imagine that the native people used stone tools, stone axes and adzes like the ones that are here, which can be found in most of the archaeological sites of the region. Okay, and the stone tool wears are perfectly recognizable over the wooden surface, as you can see here in this example of an European dugout that was found in the city of Paris. You can see how the tool wears are much more rounded in a cupola form, and they're more open than the iron tool wears, okay, or traces. And finally, combining all this information, it was possible to reconstruct two of the main roads that were used in this region by the indigenous native people. Okay? The first of them is the Chiloé-Nahuelhuapi road, which covers almost 200 kilometers from the Chiloé Island in the coast, in the ocean, up to the Nahuelhuapi Lake in the Andes Mountains. Okay, this route this route combines parts of navigation, but also of pedestrian or land sections, okay? In this land parts of the road, the people the people that use them could portage their boats. The dugouts are much more difficult to portage because they're very big and very massive, so it's difficult. They're very heavy, but the sun plank boats have the characteristic that they can be disassembled. Okay, the people that use them could disassemble the boats, portage them in groups, and reassemble them when they reach another lake or another river where they could navigate again. Okay. And the other major road was the Valdivia Basin, which is located more in the center of the region, and which cover almost 260 kilometers from the Lácar Lake, where the village of San Martín de los Andes in actual Argentina is located, up to the Pacific Ocean. And we can see here also that there are parts of navigation which are represented by these dot lines going through the lakes and using the rivers, but also there are parts where the people could walk or use the pedestrian ways. Okay. To finish, only a little summary of the conclusions of all this research. We can propose that all this data shows that the people that inhabited this territory developed a navigation culture, okay? A navigation culture on the coast, on the ocean, but also in the inner lands, in lakes and rivers. This fluvial and marine system are the way in which the different populations linked with each other. Okay? The most used boat in this region was the dugout. But we can say also that the Dalca were a more specialized boat that was used farther south from the Gulf of Reloncaví and the Chiloé Island. And we can also propose that the rafts were a more opportunistic watercraft that was used for a simple purpose of crossing a river or only for one navigation, and afterwards they were mostly abandoned. The only exception would be the more bigger rafts used to cross to the Mocha Island. Okay? There were a diversity of boats, sizes, and transport capacities. Okay? These boats had a considerable loading capacity, and the Dalca had the largest cargo capacity of almost 10 tons. Okay? You have to think that for us today, the cargo capacity of these boats is not too big, but for those times, and thinking or having in mind that these people didn't have cargo animals, having a boat to transport different kind of goods is really a technological improvement. Okay? Talking about the means of propulsion, the paddles and the long oars were the most used propulsion way. And we can propose that paddles were used on rivers because they are a much more maneuverable kind of propulsion. It's more easy to handle in a narrow environment as the river. And the long oars were mostly used in the lakes and the coast, where the navigators have more open spaces and where they can use this kind of propulsion that is more energetic saving, or is more energetic. Well, I forgot a little bit this word, but is more. They save energy using long oars instead of paddles. Okay. About the choice of the wood, we saw that they use mainly laurel and coihue, and these woods has the characteristic of being easy to work, and they have a medium mechanical strength. Okay, there is also a geographic distribution for the choice of the woods. Okay, the laurel is concentrated in the coastal lakes and the Precordillera for their use, and the coihue was mainly used in the Andes or mountain lakes as Nahuel Huapi, and in the Chiloé Island. Okay, the ulmo, which is another kind of tree, was used around the Gulf of Reloncaví, in the southern part of the region. The study of the manufacture process, or chain opératoire, gave us a result that the dalka is a little bit more complex in its construction. We can also say that the main motivation for the use of these boats and watercrafts was the transport of goods and people, but there were also secondary uses like the exploitation of resources as fish, shellfish, poultry and eggs, military activities between the different native groups, but also during the Spanish conquest, and the communication with the islands. Okay? And finally, we can say that these results and this research gives a new view to the influence of navigation in the southern Chile and northern Patagonia in the problem on the maritime adaptation of the populations of southern Patagonia. Okay? So, thank you for your patience and for listening.